Hello again, everyone, and welcome back again to Enterprise Linux Security. I'm here as always with Joao. How you doing?
I'm good, Jay. A pleasure to be here with you as always. And another fine episode today. We're looking at some vulnerabilities and some security incidents, as if that doesn't happen like every other day. But the ones that we have today are pretty interesting.
Yeah, very timely too, because they're definitely all over the news. And it's like there's one developing, there's one that, a couple that have been in the news of at least a few days. I'm not quite sure how long, but yeah, we need to talk about these events and these situations accordingly. So how about we get started?
Yeah, let's go. So the first one that we have today is called Dirty Pipe. I don't know how many of the people listening will remember Dirty Cow from 2016, but it was a vulnerability that exploited copy on write, which is a mechanism that prevents you from overwriting data directly when you're writing a file. So whenever you went to write something to the disk, it would create a copy somewhere else and it would write that information on that new location. And there was an exploit that came out that found a race condition in that write and managed to exploit that to get root privileges. There's a lot of other steps involved there, but that was basically it. It exploited that functionality in the kernel. And this week we have Dirty Pipe. So yeah, I don't know who's naming this thing, but really, please stop.
Yeah, I had a dirty pipe, what was it, 2 weeks ago that ended up bursting and causing water to flood into the basement. But it's not that. We're not talking about plumbing today.
No, we're actually talking about pipes. And anybody who's ever done basically anything on Linux knows what we're talking about. It's that vertical line. It basically is a way to redirect output and to feed output from one command to the next command in line when you're trying to get, trying to get interesting results here. It turns out that pipes are not just used directly on the shell. You can actually create them in code if you want to use inter-process communications. And when you define them in code, you can specify some flags that control how the pipe behavior will actually be when it's created. And through two different commits to the Linux kernel over the past, I believe the first one was in 2017 and the other one 2020, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. It might have been 2021, but still. Two different commits. One just reordered the way that the flags were defined in the code, and the second one actually touched on the actual pipe creation process. There is a buffer that gets created when a pipe is defined, and through a combination of both changes on those commits that were added to the kernel, it's possible to reach a point where the behavior is undefined. And through that undefined behavior, you can actually control, you as a user of the system can actually control how the pipe touches whatever you want it to touch, whatever command you want to pass the output to, in a way that lets you overwrite even write protected files. Okay, and that's pretty massive. Imagine, for example, if you can overwrite Etsy shadow, for example. That's just one way of getting your credentials in there, or just changing your groups, or just changing configurations that you're not supposed to.
And the authorized keys file,
for example. Yeah. And this has been getting some traction on news sites. It's pretty big. It basically affects any kernel above 5.8 until the very last versions, but that touches on all the big distributions like the Red Hats and the CentOSs and Ubuntu's, and all have that. Even Android is affected by this. So if you don't have root on Android, congratulations, now you can.
Yep, there's the way in right there.
Yep. I don't know, they spend days and days and lots of man hours on trying to prevent people from getting root, and then stuff like this comes up and just throws all that in the garbage.
Here's the wild idea. How about like allowing people to have root on the device that they bought? Just saying.
Wow.
That's another story altogether, though.
That's a revolutionary idea right there.
Isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, so far there is no remote attack vector available. But like Dirty Cow, when it came out, when it was announced on 2016, it had no remote attack vector either, until somebody found out that it could be exploited when you had a web server that accepted file uploads, and by letting users upload their own content to the server, they could trigger this. So it's not impossible for Dirty Pipe to have a remotely available exploit pass in the near future. And by near future, I mean tomorrow or the day after. This was announced on Monday or Sunday or something like that, like 5 days before we are recording. And from then until today, there have been lots of variants already appearing. For example, really simple exploit code that lets you overwrite not just any file, but SUID files as well. So you can replace root commands for whatever you want them to be, controlled by you, obviously. And that's a pretty bad situation for sysadmins, because if you have users on your system, regular users, now they're also root.
Yeah, you can have root. You can have root. Everybody gets root, basically. Yeah, that's a big deal. And even if, just to underscore the obvious, which may not be obvious to everyone, there's no external way to utilize this vulnerability. A vulnerability chain can. So maybe some other way into the system. They get into the system, but they hit a brick wall. They can't do anything, but they're in the system, but they don't have privileges there. Could there be a way to activate this vulnerability from a different one? I mean, that's just the way it works. So we're chaining files or commands together with the pipe symbol, but we're also doing that. We've been doing that with vulnerabilities forever. That's how vulnerabilities are done. You start with one, you go to the next, you go to the next, and you utilize as many as you can to get to what you want. So it's kind of like one of those things when you first start out in security, you're like, okay, so it's not remotely exploitable. Whew, oh gosh, that's great. I'm so relieved. That's how you feel when you start out, and then later on, it doesn't mean as much, right? It doesn't mean much to you later on.
It's like, okay, it loses meaning.
So it's 5% harder for the person to use. Got it.
And the exploit code is that simple. The code that was published when the exploit was announced was just, I don't know, it had lots of lines of code, but 99% of those lines of code were just security measures for the code itself, making sure it didn't receive other inputs and validating wherever it was running and all that. The actual exploit code was 3 or 4 lines long. It's really simple to exploit this. And getting root on whatever system you're logged into, it's pretty handy for an attacker. Like you said, it's just a nice way to escalate your privileges when you get inside of a system.
So the new Atari VCS console, they locked out the BIOS with a password, which is driving people crazy, even though they bought it. I wonder now, just use this vulnerability, get root access to it, maybe, I don't know, like clear the BIOS password. Okay, I'm just getting ahead of myself here. But this was actually, from what I understand, I'm looking at an article from ZDNet, and it looks like Max Kellerman is one who discovered this.
Yeah.
And he discovered this while he was working on a ticket about regarding corrupt files. So that's kind of a big jump. I don't know the last time or if I've ever heard of a vulnerability being discovered when someone's on the front lines, fixing problems for someone. I'm sure that is probably common, but in this case, that's, one thing leads to another. Oh, there's a vulnerability here. And it's way more complicated than that, but that's how it started.
The article that the guy published is pretty good. It's a very interesting read, and it's also very long. So if you have time, do take a look if you're interested into finding out how these vulnerabilities get discovered.
Yep.
But to give you a brief about it, it's that he works at a company that provides hosting services or something like that for other companies, and he was getting tickets about logs being corrupted. It wasn't too frequent, it wasn't every day, but every now and again he would receive a log file that was corrupted. And the log file was a zip. It was a zip file. And it turns out that the process that created those log files would pipe the output of several different processes into a large file and then create the zip, and then push the zip to a location. And every now and then, one of those zip files would have a corrupt header. And they couldn't figure out why that header was getting corrupted, because the corruption, the way that it was happening and the values that it showed when it got corrupted were basically always the same. So it wasn't like it was just calculating something wrong. It was actually writing always the same information to the wrong place when the pipe was being completed. And after a lot of staring at the code and all that, he couldn't find the error on his side. So he did what any good programmer does. He pointed his finger to somebody else and said it was a bug in the kernel. And this time, and like 99% of the other times, it was actually in the kernel. So yeah, he bisected the kernel, he identified the commits that created this, and he reached the pipe code and the changes that were committed last year. Looking deeper into that, he identified both last year's commit and the other one from 2017. And yeah, the whole process, he does a pretty good write-up of the process, how he reached this. It's very interesting. You should really take a look into this if you are interested in knowing how people actually find these things, because some of them are so out of their mind. So it's so weird to just come across something like this, because how many times have you used pipes on a Linux system? I mean, it's every day, basically.
Daily, like frequently. Not even, I mean, daily is underselling it. I mean, it's constant.
Yeah, show me the output, grab for something, just cut something out, just do a replacement, all that. You're piping output from one to the next one and processing that. And this is the crazy thing. Everybody's using pipes, and pipes have this bug. And how many outputs have been corrupted over the years and nobody noticed?
Or worse,
because it could have happened.
Yeah, it could have. I mean, you could have had someone that just didn't think to look at the kernel. Like, I don't know, I've tried everything I could think of, and this happens sometimes, right?
And those ones noticed. But what if you didn't notice? What if you just have this running inside of a script and you never actually looked at what it's creating, and then every now and then there's a corrupted output somewhere? Because
corrupted backups, yeah. I mean,
for example,
that's horrible.
You can pretty easily pipe the output from tar to gzip or something like that and pipe it, and it gets corrupted somewhere in the middle, because this would be happening in the wild without the exploit anyway. The exploit is just the easy way to trigger this, but the flaw was there.
Wow. I mean, it's so amazing that this individual, I mean, he really knows what he's doing. I mean, it's, you know, like you said, there's a lot of finger pointing in IT, and sometimes it's unavoidable, because sometimes you're right. Sometimes it is like outside your realm, and it is in someone else's realm, and they could be defensive. Oh, I don't know, man. That's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I got no problems over here. It becomes a back and forth. But
Spider-Man meme comes to mind.
Yeah, but this individual is like, okay, he knows what he's doing. He knows where the bug is, and that's just such a great mentality, because if like I said, it could just be an issue where, like, I don't know why this is happening. It's weird. I don't know. I tried to find out. I couldn't. But, you know, like we were trying to think of a name of something before the podcast started. It's like you get it in your head, like, I really need to solve this. I really need to figure this out. You know, and some of us, we get that in our heads, like we just, okay, we need to fix this problem. We need to figure this out, because we're not going to forget about it until we do. And that's either dedication or obsession. I'm not sure which, or both.
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
But it shows, for me, it shows one thing very clearly. Actually, two. First, this guy was actually capable of doing this analysis, and he knew how to look at the code. And there is an additional factor here. The web server that was generating the logs was actually written inside of his company, so they had access to the code, and they had been the ones that developed it. Okay, so it's not like they reached to Apache or Nginx or something like that and started looking at that code, because when you're looking at the foreign code base, it's really tricky to do this. If you have some familiarity with the code, it's probably easier to know where to look for the problems. And the second thing is that, imagine this has happened in a company where people were not that familiar with the code or did not have this level of knowledge. They would never have been able to track this down. It's just not something that you go out of your way to do. And he only went out of his way because the tickets never stopped. He actually ignored it the first time, and somebody actually forced him to look at the issue, and he mentioned that on the write-up. And then another, and then another, and then he noticed that it was like, I don't know, 10 or 12 every month or something like that.
Wow.
Out of dozens others. So it started to show that there was an issue there. But again, the process that he did, that he explains, he really goes through all the thought process and all the steps that he went through to reach that it was actually a bug in the kernel. And it's very interesting. It's a really good read there.
What's interesting is if I didn't know this, and if I didn't know about this at all, and someone came to me with this problem, I would be like, "Yeah, we need to test your RAM. We need to test we need to run memtest 86 on your memory. Make sure you don't have it, corrupted stick of a RAM or something like that, because it can cause this kind of thing." And
he did that. That was one of the steps.
Oh gosh, I think this might be one of the, if not the only time I've seen an issue like this that wasn't due to faulty RAM.
Yeah.
Wow.
It usually is. It usually is bad hardware somewhere, or overheating. Even overheating will probably give you this as well. It's possible to get that.
Wow.
But they did test the hardware. They did try running it on different servers and all that. And because this didn't happen all the time, it was actually hard to reproduce, because they couldn't reproduce it whenever they wanted. And so until they reached that stage when they could get it reproduced at will, they couldn't actually go look for the source. So that's actually something really important to keep in mind. When you have an issue, if you can't reproduce it, when you file your bug report, even if it's with your service provider or whatever, or whoever is selling you the service, if they can't reproduce the issue on their end, there's no way they're going to fix it. It's impossible. They can't test anything that they do on their end to see if it's fixed or not, because they cannot reproduce the problem. So that's a really important part of the process.
That's also frustrating for a lot of people too, when they just want something fixed and they don't know how to navigate it themselves, and then the other end doesn't know how to reproduce it. Then it's like, well, nothing happens at that point.
Yeah. And it's probably when you get those nasty calls for customer support and all that, "You're never fixing my issue. I'm still stuck with this. It's been months since I reported." Yeah, we can't nail it down. And then you get this this exchange going. The guys from the company will tell you there's no issue because they cannot reproduce it, and you keep complaining that there is an issue because it's happening on your machine, and you'll never agree. And this is the source for lots of disagreements on this type of situations.
Yep, more finger pointing.
Yeah,
comes down to
the Spider-Man meme.
Oh yeah, that Spider-Man meme. That's got to be like the official meme of this show, in some ways, because it's always. I mean, there's it's never one person involved in security. There's never a time when it's just one person. It just doesn't happen. It's always multiple people, always. Yeah. So, yep.
Okay, right. And another thing interesting about this one. All the major distributions have come out with patches for this. The patch turns out it's pretty simple. It's basically a one-liner, just changing the order of the flags, and it gets fixed. And one interesting aspect there, and this time I'm going to brag openly here, we at TuxCare with Kernel Care, we are the only ones providing live patches for this. Kernel Care has live patch for I don't know how many distributions that fixes this. While Red Hat's K-patch, for example, they say they cannot live patch it. And patching something like this live means that you can fix it immediately rather than waiting for a maintenance window, and it really helps with security.
It really does. Refresh me on this. I don't know if you're aware, but I remember reading about Red Hat's auto patch service, and that they're really not, I mean, they're all in, but they're not at the same time. Like, they provide this, but they don't seem to be as focused on uptime as other solution providers that provide a solution like this. So I thought I read somewhere in their articles, their documentation, that while they provide this auto patch service as a convenience, they really aren't trying to tell you that you can keep your server on all the time, even though that's what everyone wants. But I might be misquoting it. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Something in their documentation is different about others.
I wouldn't want to be casting shadow on them, but they do have on their documentation that this is only for very small fixes, and it's not something that you should rely for on production. They do have this written down on their documentation. I really don't want to badmouth them or not. They have amazing products. Big shout out to Red Hat. But yeah, they do have that information regarding their live patching solution. And it's open for everybody to see.
Yep. I think it's a difference in priority, right? Depending on the company, depending on the product, it's just either it's a really important deliverable feature or it's not as important
Yep.
as other features. And of course, Red Hat has a lot of great stuff out there, so
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
prioritize the best they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where as a company, you just got to consider your solution. And I do kind of understand where Red Hat is coming from, though, because I feel like if you're doing it right, then a reboot shouldn't really be a problem. But it is a problem for so many companies, though, unfortunately.
It is. But there's a deeper angle here. Doing live patching actually does prevent the reboots, and you can have your servers running for months or even years and still be completely protected from new threats as they appear, and even faster than if you were doing the reboots. But the thing here is that it gives you back control. As a system administrator, you get back control of your maintenance, of your operations, rather than being reacting whenever a new vulnerability comes out and having to scramble to get the maintenance window approved inside of your company and getting the downtime and getting the systems patched and then back up again and making sure everything is okay. Live patching just solves the problem and then lets you do the reboot at your own pace. Whenever you're ready to do it, whenever you have your maintenance windows, your regular maintenance windows, you can then take down the systems and fix anything else that you want.
Yep.
It's a question of getting back control. Rather than being reactive, you can be proactive and keeping your systems secure in the meantime.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Be proactive if you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And yeah, that's probably about it for Dirty Pipe, and we can continue on to the next one. And the next one,
yeah.
And the next one is something that is very unexpected, and I'm completely joking here. Who could have guessed that Spectre has a new variant? Yay, everybody! Because it's like the 20th variant of Spectre and Meltdown that we've seen over the years. And this week, there's a new one. And this new one is even more insidious. Why? Because all the protections that were put in place to cover for the previous 20 variants are no longer useful, and this one can break them all. So it's called, let me not get this wrong, branch history injection. And it was discovered by VUSEC security researchers. There's actually two CVEs associated with this. It's CVE 2022-0001 and 0002. It's the first two of this year. They were the first requested in this year, and they are just now being announced. It hits Intel CPUs and also ARM. So ARM also gets some love here from Spectre. And yeah, it's the same thing. It lets you snoop on other processes that you shouldn't have access to. Like, say, for example, they have an example video of this, and you can get the hash for the root password in a few seconds. So you have to remember that for the first protections, when you had red poline added to the kernel and when you had all those mitigations added to the microcode on the CPUs, you were getting a performance hit, a really massive performance hit.
Yep.
Now you have that performance hit and the protections don't work. See how good this is?
Oh, boy, that's a double whammy there.
Yeah. It's still being... more things are still being announced around these vulnerabilities. Expect this to be big. It won't die down so quickly.
Right.
None of these variants have. So yeah, in the next few days, we'll probably have some more information about it. So far, it's just the CVE numbers and the information that new variants for Spectre are out there. It's like every other week or every other month you get a new one, and it just doesn't stay that.
Right. So developing story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also want to talk about every Linux user's favorite company in the whole wide world. Every Linux user loves and adores this particular company.
Come on, now you're just being mean. Nvidia had a pretty interesting last week. That's just one way to put this. It turns out that this hacking group called Lapsus with a $sign at the end, they decided to target Nvidia, and we'll go through the way that they got access to that data, but they managed to steal some information from Nvidia, both regarding hardware specifications, how the chips are designed, as well as code and employee information and all that. And from the stuff that they released when they announced that they had this information, by the way, they're demanding a ransom from Nvidia.
Of course.
Of course, because that's what you do when you get confidential information. They actually released source code for some integrated GPU stuff, and it seems that it's legit. They do have the information about this. And they were asking Nvidia for $1 million, I believe, which seems a bit low, but still. Or else they would release this. They were actually asking Nvidia to release something else. They were asking Nvidia to release the source code for Linux, which is something that we would all like.
We would love to contribute to open source because you hacked our systems and stole our data. Of course, we would love to do that. That'd be great.
But see how this gets when you need somebody to ask that as part of a ransom. But yeah, that was something that they were asking for, was that source code was made available, or else everything was leaked to the web.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not good at all.
And like any good hacking group, they have a Twitter account, they have a Telegram group, all the fun stuff, and they keep posting more and more stuff. This did take an unexpected turn later in the week, and we're talking about the previous week as we are recording. This had an interesting turn. It turns out that the way that the hackers got access was through a machine that was outside of the Nvidia's perimeter network, and being outside, it was still registered on their central identity management. Think, for example, on Windows, an Active Directory server. And they were actually implementing something that we discussed not too long ago called Zero Trust. They do have Zero Trust in place at Nvidia, which kudos to them, good practice. It turns out that to connect to their VPN, you had to let the Nvidia servers validate that the machine that you're connecting from was actually meeting their criteria. So that was not rooted or whatever. I don't have the specifics of what they were actually checking for, but that machine that the hackers used was actually passing validation and was connected to their internal network.
So the hackers following the company's protocol because they just want to be nice
following good policy, because good hackers right there. So they got in, they got access to their file servers, they got access to basically anything. They were on the inside. It's like on Scream, it's coming from inside the house. They got the data. They claim to have about 1 terabyte of data. It's a lot of stuff. And then the interesting thing is that later in the week, because NVIDIA is not just sleeping at the wheel and they actually have some pretty knowledgeable people inside, because the system was still connected and because the system was connected to their central server, they ordered that the server to tell the system to encrypt all its data. And it did, because it followed compliance and it had all the right clients installed. So NVIDIA hacked the hackers and encrypted their data.
Wow.
And, and then they published some information about that, NVIDIA saying that they had encrypted the data and all that. And then the hackers came out and said, oh, we have backups. Because everybody follows good practices around here, basically.
Everyone's doing their due diligence to do it the right way, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. That's how you exfiltrate the information right there. But yeah, it's a lot of information. They did came out with that integrated GPU code, and it turns out to be legit, or it seems to be legit as far as it's possible to tell. They also published some employee data, and they are still, as far as I know, I haven't checked, as far as I know, demanding that ransom from NVIDIA, claiming to still have the information. And the thing is, they are going to release, or they claim to release chip design, the actual files for the chip architecture, and that's a pretty massive blow for a company like NVIDIA. In addition to source code, in addition to drivers code, to documentation, to all that, it's a pretty big blow if that comes out and turns out to be actually true.
Maybe they should have encrypted their backups too, that person's backups, so that way it doesn't have anything to to leak out. But yeah, that's just so crazy that someone just broke in like that. I almost wonder, what are the odds that it's a inside actor? Is that a possibility, or is it clear that it's not? I don't know yet.
I don't know. This group seems to have been active on other hacks as well. They claim to have data from other stuff not related to Nvidia. I don't know if there is no indication so far. We have seen that in the past. Remember, we discussed a hack where it was some disgruntled employee that actually hacked the company. At this point, we don't know yet.
I just found it odd that they were able to pass all the tests. But I'm not saying that there's no other way to do it than to be an inside person, but obviously these people that break in, they break in. That's what they do. And if they want to check some boxes as they break in, sure, why not? But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the story develops, because I feel like there's something else here. There has to be. I don't know what
there has to be. There has to be. And well, I don't know if they turn out to release the data, and I hope not, because it's really going to hurt Nvidia. If they do end up releasing the data, we might get better better drivers for Linux.
Might be one way to do it. I wish we did it like the legit way, because Nvidia wanted to contribute and provide that information. AMD is pretty open, if not fully open. I don't remember the last time I've had to install a AMD driver for one of their GPUs. So if it wasn't for my editing rig, and apparently the software I use being better on NVIDIA, allegedly, I probably have an AMD card and everything. But that being said, NVIDIA, they do make great products, that they do work well. You just want to see some open source drivers, but I would rather this not be the way that it happens.
Yeah, and I don't know if the message got across, but I'm not in any way condoning their behavior. Far from it. But this is the story as it has been developing. Another thing that this hacking group has tried to do is sell the information on how to bypass their crypto mining lock that they had on some cards. And apparently it's possible to disable that just on software. And they found that out on the data that they stole, and they are selling that to crypto mining farms and all that. So yeah, there are cards that will turn out to be valuable for miners again. So because the market is not just being starved of graphic cards, there go another batch for the crypto miners.
Wow, that's a shame. Yeah, we're definitely not condoning their behavior, and I almost wonder, like, if it were me, this happened, if it was my company, I would say, well, I'm definitely not open sourcing it now. As much as I hate to say this, it's just like, obviously it has nothing to do with the open source developers, at least I hope not. I'm sure it doesn't. But we all want to do it the legit way, but I feel like asking for an open source driver is just kind of ridiculous. Like, nobody is going to do that because they're forced or being forced to do it. And obviously when NVIDIA has a problem like this, the last thing they're telling their people to do right now is, we all need to develop this open source driver right now. No, their security team is on this. They're working with their security team. They're working with their IT team and all that. So they're not doing that right now. I don't know that for sure. I haven't spoke to anyone at NVIDIA, but I would highly doubt that anyone there, unless they were already coincidentally working on an open source driver, that they're working on it now. And even if they were, the whole company is on this, most likely. So
even if they were working on that driver, they would never release it just to comply with the ransomware. It's not how it works. It's
absolutely not. I hope NVIDIA makes that decision someday. I do like their products. I'd like them even more if they were fully open source, because I'd be happier to use it. But right now, I just kind of, I'm going to keep following this as I know you are, and we'll see what develops out of this story, because like we said earlier, there's something else going on here. I don't know what yet, but there's something else that's going to come out.
And it's really interesting to see that even following, zero trust security, there's still a way to get in. There's always a way to get in. You just have to do your utmost to delay it and to stop as many of the attacks as possible. But keep in mind what we usually say: there's no 100% security. Nobody has that. Nobody can give you that. You just can be as protected as you can possibly manage, but 100%, it's impossible.
Overconfidence is the enemy of security, because But it's sometimes I feel like it's the industry, not necessarily the experts. It's the non-experts that are marketing, right? Like you're marketing a product, then the person marketing whatever the product is, they're not going to be like, well, this is a mediocre product that has a 20% chance of fixing your problem, but we got a good price on it. So if you want it, here it is. I don't think marketing works that way. So it's like, of course they're going to say like, this is going to make you secure. This is going to like fix everything. It's going to, increase your security. Yeah, it'll increase your security, but they sometimes say, more than that. And then, CTOs, CEOs look at this and, oh yeah, I want that. I want that perfect security that they're selling. I want to get that, and I want to get that implemented. Obviously, IT people know better than that, but it's always this scenario where if anyone gets overconfident that their security is the best, it's always low hanging fruit. You can have like the most state of the art, as full well. You have the state of the art security, the best ever. It's still not going to be perfect because there's still that Raspberry Pi or that server in the closet or that one router that everybody thought was disconnected but is strangely still plugged in and working, or that one server that everyone forgot that was still there because they thought it was decommissioned, that hasn't been updated in 10 years, and then they use that to get in. There's always something. It's just one of those things. I obviously, if there was a way to have perfect security, we would be telling you to do that. And the podcast series would be one episode long and we'd be done and there'd be nothing else to talk about. But the very fact that we're on 21 episodes now tells you probably everything you need to know about security right there.
Yeah. And it won't stop here, by the way. So, but to your point, overselling a product and then under delivering it happens every day, and you really cannot go after the hype, or else you'll be fooling yourself. Like we've always said, there's no 100% security. You just can do the best. You can try to do the best possible in any given situation, but there is no guarantee of total security.
That's right.
And you can see through Nvidia, nobody doubts that they have a great security team. Nobody doubts that they have good practices in place because they have to, or else this would have happened way, way earlier than it has.
Right.
I mean, all of these big companies, all of these big names, they're targeted day in, day out by lots of different malicious actors. And you don't hear about it because most of them cannot get in. And in this case, you hear about it because it's news that somebody did get in. And they managed to delay this by years. And that's a
How
win
long
on their
until
book.
Someone is playing a computer game and they notice that their frames per second is 10 lower with a new driver, and they get so upset that they just got to hack someone and hack in and show them that ruins their gaming? How dare you? Your driver is horrible. I mean, it's just, it's kind of funny. Like Steve Gibson on Security Now, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, he refers to all of these things as security theater.
That's a good way to look at it.
It really is. It's like this ongoing security soap opera that there's all these different players, but it's actually more entertaining than, there's no love story here, although hackers love to, hack, obviously. But there's all these different things. And it's like, sometimes I'm looking at these stories, I'm like, you can't even make this up. You can't even make this stuff up. I wouldn't have thought Nvidia would be the next target. But then again, there's nothing separating them from any other company that has low hanging fruit. So
you can't make up that Nvidia managed to encrypt the attacker's system. That's amazing. First, how the attacker still had that system connected.
The only thing...
Hacking 101, you should run. You don't do something like this and stay connected. You take care of whatever you can and you get the hell away. Leaving it connected, you're asking for trouble. They can trace you back. That's one way to find you.
That is one way, yeah, absolutely. I feel like you're right. You couldn't have predicted this, but I think the only story that I'm aware of, and I can't remember how long ago this was, that's funnier than this, or I shouldn't say funny because it's not a funny situation, but unpredictable. But this one is funny where I can't remember the printer manufacturer. There's a limited number of printers, obviously, and printers are a swear word in IT. We all hate printers, right? But do you love printers? I don't think you do, right?
No.
But there was this, I'm trying to remember now, like a exposure that these printers are being used for like DDoS attacks, and the manufacturer obviously decommissioned that model. They don't write the driver anymore, and then someone wrote malware that goes around fixing it. Goes around fixing and patching up this this problem because the manufacturer couldn't be bothered to fix it themselves. So some clever person wrote malware that just goes through and close. I don't know if it was closing a port or what it was doing, but it was actually fixing everyone's printer and making them so they're not vulnerable.
Yeah, and I
Which is
remember.
absolutely illegal. Don't do that. It doesn't make a difference about legality here because, if you're, getting into people's systems, it doesn't matter if you're trying to like help or you think you're helping.
If you don't
it's still
have
not a good
permission,
idea.
it's illegal.
Right. But that person decided that that's what they were going to do. And I should probably look up that story, see if I could find it and whatever happened to that individual, if he got caught or not. But it was still funny. Like, it's literally like a vigilante type of thing going on, like the Batman of software.
I seem to recall something like that, but it wasn't printers. It was routers, like the Helm routers.
Was it routers? I guess it's so easy to blame printers because it's either DNS or printers usually, right?
Yeah, but I think it was routers. I remember that story, but it was, I don't know, a year ago. Time just compresses with all this weirdness that's going around
in the world. I don't even know what day of the week it is.
Yeah, it's January 17th or something like that from 2020. But I digress. I believe it was routers. It was some flaw in routers that someone on the internet decided to start fixing it because it's really easy to scan for them. I know you mentioned Shodan recently, and yeah, Shodan is one way to scan the whole internet to find something. So if you're looking for that particular service and you want to patch all the systems that have it, Shodan will give you the list of IPs that you need to connect to. So you have the list, you have your script that uploads to those and shuts the service down, for example, and ta-da, you protected those servers. You're a vigilante.
Yeah, the Batman of patching. I will patch your servers in the night. Oh my gosh, that's classic. But in all seriousness, though, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Like we said a few times, we don't condone anything that we're mentioning here. We might snicker about some things just because of the irony involved there. Doesn't mean that we're trying to have a fan obviously be the next person we joke about. It's not about that. But sometimes I feel like security is just such a train wreck a lot of times that you have to laugh about it to kind of keep your sanity sometimes, because there's just always something that's going on. And, I can't even predict what's going to come next. I've given up on this. Like, I don't even know. Like, next time we could be talking about someone's stuffed animal is cloud controlled and ends up breaking into Amazon, whatever, right? All kinds of things. And Nvidia's we talked about that. We talked about the new Spectre variant that, like you said, nobody ever saw that coming.
Yeah.
And then Dirty Pipe is now a thing, and that's coming after Log4j. I think when we said that this is going to be an interesting security year, I think we undersold that statement.
Yeah, I think we considered the whole year, but it's only been like 2.5 months or 3 months starting now or something like that.
Right.
And it's already the show that it is. So, yeah. And by the way, I'm personally rooting for NVIDIA security team here. I hope they manage to fix everything and close the hole that allowed the attackers in. And yeah, I hope they manage to get their data back and it doesn't get leaked.
Yeah, I mean, I hope all the same. And it's such a frustrating situation because I don't know what NVIDIA is like internally. I've never worked with them. I never talked to them. I just have to imagine that their security and IT teams are really stressed out, really overworked right now, just like a lot of us are. But it's just one of these things that happens that we see what the company statements are and what the news is saying, but on the inside, it's usually a lot worse. There's a lot of people that are working hard on this, that are, giving up personal time for this. So hopefully, everyone at NVIDIA settles down soon into, whatever their norm is at the company. I know they work hard, and hopefully this just goes in a good direction, because it's kind of not to say it the least way. But yeah.
It's important to come out and say this. When you're hacking, when you're doing black hat stuff, everything you're doing, all the gains that you may get are offset by the hurt that you're causing other people. Right. You're not personally stabbing them or something like that, but you are hurting them personally. They will be spending more time at work. They will probably get in trouble at work. There will be issues inside of the company that we will never be aware of. There have already probably been dozens of meetings at NVIDIA, damage control and what to do next and how to cope with the situation and all that. And everything caused by this hacking group. And yeah, that's a lot of hurt and a lot of grief that you're causing for some gain that you might expect to get from this. But in the end, you're probably going to get a visit from the FBI.
You probably are. And we've seen this before. All it takes is one packet to escape your VPN because it disconnected, and this has happened. We've talked about this.
The Silk Road.
It takes. And then another thing to realize is that, some, especially entry-level hackers, I think they're so amazing because they tunneled their internet connection through someone else's computer somewhere else. But what they don't realize is that the only thing that sets them or keeps them safe from getting thrown in jail is how many subpoenas the other end is willing to go through to get to them. So if they've, tunneled their connection through another computer, that's one subpoena. If they've gone 10 different computers, that they have 10 different tunnels or something, it's just going to slow them down a bit. There's subpoena. Oh, there's the person right there. That's all it takes. I don't care if you're using Tor, whatever. It's just, no, just don't. Responsible disclosure is better because you could tell people about a problem before the news gets a hold of it, give them a chance to fix it, let them know what's going on. But then again, I say that with caution because some companies out there, I'm not going to say which ones, you report an issue, they're going to try to call the police because they don't understand how this works. You're trying to do something good, but responsible disclosure, knowing, what the right channels are and the right way to do this is very important. And it can lead to a really great career. For sure. That's a very fun career. You're actually helping people. But this whole ransom stuff, I mean, even if you do get that $1 million, I really hope you enjoy it for the month of freedom you have left before the police haul you away.
Absolutely.
It's not worth it.
Especially when you're dealing with this type of companies, because Nvidia is large enough that they will subpoena everybody and their neighbors to get to you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. So yeah, that's been another great episode yet again. We had a lot to talk about today, and I don't know what next week's episode is going to be just yet, but it's either going to be an educational topic or an "oh my god, you'll never guess what happened" topic. I'm not sure.
Another variant of Spectre, I could guess, but that's just me.
Oh,
we'll see what comes up.
Or
the news.
Log4j again, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Until the next one.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.